Thank you so much for being here. As we did with our previous candidates, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in 90 seconds. Please state your name, the office you're seeking, and then answer the following question. What do you think are the most important solutions at the school board level to address sea level rise and flooding?
Thank you, and thank you for staying throughout the program tonight to listen to school board members. My name is Dr. Nicole Carr, and I think the key issues that will face the school board include being proactive in the way that we implement curriculum that addresses and promotes both creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving, utilizing our programs that are in place like STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Those are important ways that we can promote a civically engaged population that cares about the environment and works to solve these problems. Additionally, I think we need to focus on making sure that our facilities are to the best as green as possible, and that we also make sure that we address the concerns and problems with our transportation. We are the largest transporters of individuals, and the carbon footprint that we have with all those big yellow buses all across the county is a way that we can certainly reduce our carbon footprint as a school district.
My name is Lorena Grizzle, and I'm running in District 6, which is Pinellas Park, part of St. Pete, the beaches, and Seminole. And I actually am a teacher, and I taught environmental science last semester, so I have a great background for this. And also I grew up with my mother, was Senator Mary Grizzle, who actually was the first one to stop the advanced wastewater being dumped into the bay, along with Senator Wilson. I believe the first thing we need to do is educate these kids. We had a project in our group that we had the Lorax, I don't know if you know that story from Dr. Seuss. These kids actually made their own towns and actually had to be renewable energy, had to replace the trees that they used, and it worked. And the other thing is we need to lead by example. I think that if the school systems were actually doing things like putting solar panels on our roofs, and maybe we could even have windmills in some schools just to show kids this is how it's done. We don't even have, I feel like the St. Pete College has their solar panels. We don't have any here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Larson. I'm running for Pinellas County School Board Seat 2, which is a county-wide seat. So if you live in Pinellas County, I'm on your ballot. I think the biggest solution is to have a plan. Now that plan, first of all, as a school board, obviously must include education. And when we talk about curriculum, we talk about education, let's make sure that our education is based on science. Because the science when it comes to climate change is very clear. But additionally, any large organization, any governmental organization needs to have a sustainability plan. That plan should start with baseline data. It should have specific goals and objectives. We need to identify hurdles and obstacles, and then we need to move forward with action. And when I talk about action, I'm talking about putting solar panels on top of our schools. I'm talking about high efficiency lighting. Electric vehicles, buses were mentioned, but the school district also has a lot of cars. Trucks, different vehicles. It's not only school buses. So electric vehicles are something that we could look at. Also charging stations. Charging stations for teachers, charging stations for parents that are on campus. That's something else that can be looked at as well. The bottom line is that we need to have a plan. I'll tell you, my own home, I drive a Toyota Prius. My wife drives a fully electric Nissan Leaf. We have solar panels on our home, so we plan on being net zero when it comes to energy. And we're doing this because it's the right thing for the environment, but it's also the right thing for our own budget. And this is going to be the right thing for the Pinellas County School Board budget as well. Go Rays.
My name is Carl Zimmerman. I'm running for Seat 3, which is also county-wide, and I'm a recently retired teacher of 33 years. I think, number one, we have to look at schools that it's part of the community. Our students live in the community, so it's not just a matter of what is the school going to do. It's if we don't do something, we're not going to have a place for our students to live. The community's not going to have a place to live. I really believe, and I've taught this way for 33 years, that you engage students in real-world problems. And there isn't a more real-world problem than solving this. One of the things that fascinates me, I just heard about a week ago, is the available electric in the air, and that it increases by 100 volts for every meter that you rise above sea level. And to be able to harness that, remember Ben Franklin wanted to do it with a kite? To be able to harness that, to me, provides the opportunity for all the solutions we need. But students are the ones that I believe can figure that out. So that's where it would begin. Yes, solar without a doubt. My house is solar. I drive a Chevy Volt. My wife drives a Chevy Volt. I don't remember how to go to a gas station half the time. And so that's where it begins.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. My name is Lisa Kane. I am running for Pinellas County School Board in District 2. I am a community arts teacher. I own a small theater called the Tampa Bay Performing Arts Academy, where I teach students musical theater. For me, one of the solutions to this pressing issue is, of course, educating our children, allowing them to be involved in the solution. Hands-on training is what helps students to remember and become involved in community issues. I've done a lot of community service projects with my students over the years, and they love being involved to help the community. So we need to educate them in ways that they're able to help us with this problem. Of course, I do believe that Pinellas County needs to tie in solar panels to our infrastructure plan. We are creating new plans all the time with school safety and increasing our hardening of schools, but perhaps there's a way there to tie in the use of solar and reusable energy. My husband is a certified FEMA contractor who gets sent in post-disaster relief in order to rebuild, so I'm pretty familiar with the process for solar through him. And I think that our communities need to rally around contractors who are trying to help rebuild our communities. Oftentimes they're stopped at a local level due to the building department codes and enforcements. And so if the community, in an effort to create disaster relief, could rally behind them and create easier ways for them to rebuild, we have contractors on the ground ready to go that are FEMA certified to help with this community problem.
Thank you. Now, the first question for all candidates, some of you touched on this, but I would like to ask all of you. Would you support implementing sea level rise education into the school curriculum? How would you plan a curriculum like this?
You can start this time.
You can start wherever. You can start over there, yeah.
I'll start. One of the things a lot of people don't know is that the Tampa Bay area happens to be one of the centers in the entire country for bioengineering. I think, again, by engaging our students and having them study this, I think we provide plenty of opportunities for that. And could you repeat the question, Ellen?
Yeah, if you would support it, and what would that curriculum look like? How would you plan?
All right, so absolutely I would support it. I think, again, because I believe in real-world solutions, that's what we provide the opportunity for students to do. And I would start with the science curriculum.
I also agree with Carl that in the implementation of a curriculum like this, the first thing we need is research. We need to be in touch with members of the science community who are familiar with the statistics, who are familiar with what is going on in our seas and our oceans. What's the root cause of such a grand problem in our community, and how can we bring that information down to a student level where we're communicating at age level and age appropriate curriculum throughout the county and throughout the system. Most of our schools are elementary age, so we would need to tailor some of that information so that they can understand it, and also help them to figure out ways to that they can help to solve such a problem. Students are wildly creative, and I love seeing some of the ideas that they come up with, especially students who are entering our engineering programs and science programs throughout the community. They may have better ideas than some of us, and so I think we need to allow them to help drive the curriculum forward in our community and drive the solutions forward in this growing problem.
The curriculum needs to be based on science. There's people that have a PhD in the sciences, and they need to be the ones to write the curriculum. So when you ask what would the curriculum look like, it would look like real science. The bottom line, when you're dealing with curriculum, Throughout the campaign, I've been talking about how our district has a problem with curriculum turnover, that we adopt a new program and we only stick with it for 2 years, then we adopt some other new program, and that's been a problem that I've been talking about. But when it comes to science, we actually do need to make sure that our science programs are changing and are up to date, because the science is changing. We need to make sure that our students are aware of climate change and aware of the cause of climate change, because there is no doubt about the cause. So we need to make sure that we've got that information up to date. And as we continue to get more projections about, what pieces of land are going to be underwater in 20 years, 10 years, 30 years, we need to make sure that information is being communicated to our students as well.
Well, and of course I support this curriculum, and I would have a unit on sea level rise as first research articles. We have to look at those, and we would have questions for that. That's how we do a lot of the environmental science now. But I would also try and do a model. We're basically a bathtub. We've been warming up the water for a long time, and ice is melting, and it's going to continue after we stop warming the water. And they need to see that exactly how this is going to affect us. And also, we have in the beginning we have mitigation, where we decide, okay, we're going to stop using this energy. Then we have adaptation, where we build seawalls, and then we have retreat. And I think this is what the kids need to see, because eventually economics is going to dictate that only these houses that are higher up on the ground are going to be rebuilt, and they need to see this is what's going to happen, because they're the ones who are going to be here. Thank you.
We do teach science in school, and I have a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they did and have both learned about sea level rise. The concern is with recent legislation that any community member can question and ask for a review of the curriculum. So it's really important that the individuals you choose to represent you on the school board do believe in science. I believe in science, and it's important for us to have a process in place for us to still meet that mandate, but at the same time ensure that science is taught in school. So they have learned it, they are continuing to learn it. Community partnerships, including right here at USF St. Pete, utilize opportunities for students to be exposed to it visually. And I think that we should increase those partnerships and increase the access to our elementary schools, which all have now a science lab. So it's important for us that we inform the public about what is happening in our schools, and we're communicating that, and we're connecting with our community in a way that they see what's being done within our schools. And additionally, that we build on those partnerships, as well as ensure that the process for reviewing this curriculum doesn't move us backwards. We've known about the greenhouse effect since I graduated from high school years ago.
All right, and we can start from left to right on this one. As sea levels rise and storm surges increase, how do you plan to prepare students and faculty for hurricane season to ensure their safety to, from, in, and out of school?
Well, fortunately, there is notice for things like a hurricane. Unfortunately, we don't always have notice for our duck and cover drills. I think it's very important, and right now with the new Guardian program, there has been some review of our drills and processes and procedures. I myself was a former assistant principal here at Lakewood Elementary in St. Petersburg, and one of the things I noticed at times when you were asked, because sometimes an assistant principal is asked to go to another school to cover that building, is the difference between implementation of duck and cover, evacuation, fire drill. So there needs to be a uniform process, so no matter where the child attends school, they know the routine, they know the drill, they know how to proceed, and they are able to follow those rules. And for teachers and substitutes to be completely familiar. And there's too much variability dependent upon the principal or assistant principal within the building. So I think it's very important as a school board that we make sure that policy reinforces the practices that take place, so we can make sure that our children are safe when they're going to school if there should be a storm that hits our school.
Well, first of all, we need better communication between the principals and the staff, because what happened was people wanted to volunteer, the teachers, and the principal wasn't available. We couldn't find out when we could come, what we could do. And what was interesting was the schools that were centers where people could go and be safe, actually were feeding the community, and the community, they go out and they want to come back because, you know, there was some food there. So we actually need to, it would be great if we can do a better job on the food and make sure that we feed the community. The other thing we need to do is, again, make our transportation we need to make transportation so that we can get around from one place to another. It's really hard to evacuate when we can't.
Safety certainly has to be the #1 goal when we're dealing with our children, as well as the employees of the Pinellas County School District. And so I definitely think that we need to err on the side of caution when it comes to closing schools in advance of a hurricane. I'll share with you just kind of an anecdotal example. I've been a teacher for 14 years, and during this most recent hurricane season, I got a Facebook message from a former student who's now in her 20s, and her husband is a bus driver for the Pinellas County school system. And the school system had not yet made a decision on when to close schools or if to close schools. And so she said to me, "We want to evacuate, but my husband is a bus driver and he doesn't want to get fired. What should we do?" And of course, I didn't have any answer for her. I was only running for school. I didn't have any answer for her at that point in time. But the bottom line is, for the safety of our kids and for the safety of our employees, we need to make sure we're making that decision on whether or not to close schools early enough so everybody can safely evacuate.
That was going to be my first point, is that evacuation needs to be announced as early as possible. This last hurricane that we had, people set out 4 days in advance, and yet they were still on I-75, I-95, and traffic was at a dead stop, and we ran out of gas. So the earlier the better. The second part is that we have a huge problem with the evacuation of where do pets go. Pets were the #1 reason people didn't want to go to evacuation centers, because they couldn't bring their pet. So they were willing to risk their lives and stay in their home. I think we need to provide, and since the schools are the main areas of evacuation, I think we need to provide an area where people know they can bring their pet. And we need to keep it separate from the area where people that don't have pets are, so that kids are safe and not going to be bitten by a dog or whatever. But I think that alone it could be a major improvement over what we're currently doing.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So as sea levels rise and storm surges increase, how do you plan to prepare students and faculty for hurricane season to ensure their safety to, from, in, and out of school?
Thank you very much. Yes, school safety is a huge issue in this run for Pinellas County School Board, and one of the things that I have been behind and I believe needs to be implemented in Pinellas County schools that currently is not. I have 2 children that are part of the Pinellas County school system now, 1 on the way and 1 coming in a couple of years. I have 4 children of my own, so I've experienced what is going on in our safety system as it is. I also attended Pinellas County schools and have lived here my whole life. And one of the things I don't see in our Pinellas preparation system is education for students, teachers, and faculty on emergency response and also on natural disaster response. We have had a fire plan in place for years and years. Everyone knows stop, drop, and roll, but no one knows what to do in the case of an emergency situation, in situations like open shooter, situations like a hurricane or a tornado or natural disaster that may hit our schools. And so I feel like the Pinellas County could do very well to partner with the Sheriff's Department to develop individual school safety plans that can be taught at an age-appropriate level to students, because education is most important in an emergency situation. If we don't know what to do and we don't know where to go, we're in trouble. And even if there is mass chaos, some portion of that student body and that teacher faculty is going to remember the procedure that's put in place and practiced throughout the school year, just like a fire drill. Additionally, I also agree with Carl. Pets is the #1 issue. We actually used my theater as an evacuation zone for that very reason, for people who didn't want to leave their pets. And it's an increasing problem for evacuation.
We have a few audience questions, and these two have to do with environmental science, so I'm going to combine them since we kind of addressed it. I'm going to read through them. The science curriculum changed. Environmental education was eliminated in elementary education and replaced with FCAT reflective science. How would you bring environmental education back? And then we have another audience member who asked, how important is it for environmental science to be taught in public schools? What would you do to require that environmental science be taught? And can you address what is being taught now?
Does anyone want to go?
Okay.
Okay. We do have some units of environmental science at varied grade levels, and we also have earth science. However, with course codes being different, we do not have in the same way the environmental science as it once was. However, I do think we need to utilize the content that is covered in environmental science throughout our curriculum. As a former school counselor, I know that one of the issues and concerns that faces us is the over-testing of students. It takes away our ability to deliver student services to students, and it narrows our curriculum. While it's important for us to utilize standards, I think at the same time it has stifled us and forced us to take a lot of the creativity out of the classroom and a lot of the joy away from teaching. So as a school board member, I believe it's important that we have standards so we're not always learning about the rainforest in first, second, and third grade, because that's so fun to teach, and then pulleys getting left out. But that we have to make sure that it isn't narrowing our curriculum. Pulleys, levers, and pulleys is that piece. So that it's not narrowing our curriculum. So as a school board member, I would advocate that we make sure our curriculum, which is included in our guide and approved at some levels by the school board. I'm out.
Well, I was an elementary teacher last year, and I was just appalled at the lack of not only science but social studies. And we had a good system at elementary school I worked at 10 years ago. We actually financed a science teacher by having a science camp during the summer. This teacher brought the kids in. The teacher stayed with the class for 30 minutes. And they actually had real science and a real science teacher. This man stayed after school till 6 o'clock, because I was there also. 6 or 7 o'clock at night getting ready for the next day. That's real science, and we need to get back to it. And I don't know who drank the Kool-Aid for Common Core and over-testing and standardized this and that. That is just what has just, it's horrible what we've done to our school system. So I would support that, and I also would like to support the idea of having these science teachers come in and actually teach the kids. I think that we could do that. And I also believe that we need to stop this testing.
Yeah, I'd also like to address the issue of the focus of testing. This is an issue at the national level, at the state level, and here at the county level, where the shift in education is that we are so focused on testing and test scores. And as a result of that, as the question indicates, is designed to be directly aligned with the FCAT for science and with the FSA for math and reading and so forth. And yeah, it's certainly good that we prepare our kids for these tests, but the bottom line is we need to prepare them for life. And when we talk about, climate change and rising waters and things of that nature, these are some of the top issues in the news right now, and obviously these are science issues. So it's important that our district take a leadership role to make sure that we're educating our students on the issues that really matter.
Every course and every grade level in Florida has Florida standards. These are the things that we need to cover. However, we have tremendous flexibility in what we do in our own classroom. I was a classroom teacher for 33 years, and I wanted to teach screenplay writing, and they got rid of the course. So I taught screenplay writing inside another class. I covered the standards for that class. I didn't emphasize them as greatly as others may, but I covered those standards, and I had that freedom to then teach screenplay writing. So I bring this up because as a school board, when we see there's a deficit in a certain area, for example, in 4th grade, if we don't cover basic sentence structure, and if kids don't know how to do basic math they are going to suffer for the rest of their lives. We know that that has to be accomplished by 4th grade. So we have that flexibility as a school board. We have to abide by the standards of Florida, but we have the flexibility to create our own curriculum and emphasize what we need to emphasize for Pinellas County.
As part of the question, one of my primary reasons for running as a parent, as a mom of Pinellas County, is the deterioration I have personally seen in the Pinellas County school system and what we are teaching. I attended Pinellas County schools 20 years ago, and yes, sea level rise was a part of science education in elementary school when I went. Unfortunately, I have 2 students in the system, and I'm seeing a great many areas that are being left behind. Social studies being a huge one, geography, science, basic science, in many of its forms, are not being taught at the elementary level at this point. And yes, education is being focused on the testing, which means homework comes home, and what we're seeing as parents is STMath and iStation. That's what we see on a daily basis. I haven't seen a whole lot of other curriculum come home with either one of my students. So I feel that if I was elected to school board, how would I help I would help to increase education across all boards. We need to stop focusing on testing. We're dealing with human beings that are being raised to be community members and one day hold jobs in our county. We need to make sure they're ready for that and that they know more than just how to take a standardized test, but that they know how to be good, active community members, that they understand government, that they understand basic science, that they understand what's happening in their community and in the world around them. So for me, it would be increasing our education level is a primary issue and my reason for running for this election.
All right, for this one, we're going to start right to left. It's another audience question, and it says, what could be done to eliminate the carbon pollution parents produce as they idle in a car line to pick up their children?
What a great question. I've spent many, many days in the car line at our elementary school, and one way perhaps we could implement more group traveling, more carpooling situations where we're using less cars in the car line, but also to make our car line faster. There could be a releasing students by a certain order so that we have a certain specific time frame to get in the car line. That would help as well, because I know every single one of us, we drive up, we tell them our student's name, and we drive through the line, and we have to wait for them to find our student wherever they're standing and waiting to be released to us. So that takes an incredible amount of time in the car line that could definitely be shortened. Additionally, maybe more supervised walks and bike rides to school. I know my students a lot of times do, we bike ride from our house. We're lucky enough to live close enough that we can do that. And, but there's some areas that might be a slightly greater distance I wouldn't feel comfortable with my students going, so maybe a little more supervision on the traffic, on the sidewalks and things would make parents feel more comfortable to allow their student to ride the bike or walk with a greater distance. So those are a couple of suggestions I have. I'm sure if I looked at it, I would come up with a few more.
Basically, I think we just need to look at our patterns, our traffic patterns, and rethink them at every school. I was at Countryside High School, and we used to have a bus circle. The school was designed to have a bus circle in the front of the school. Then, because of the changes in the roadways, we had to move that to another location. And we had to move the parent drop-off to a different location, and it became highly inefficient. One day, the principal sat down with some staff members and devised a very large circle, that U-shaped, where the parents could come in, drop off, and keep going, and there was no parking allowed except to stop and drop. And that improved probably 100%. So I think rethinking our pathways in the schools would help a lot.
Yeah, I think in education, a lot of times people do something because that's the way it's always been done. And if you look at some of the car lines, somebody might say, hey, how come you do it like this? Why is this the procedure? And the answer might be, I don't know, that's how we've always done it. So I think what needs to happen is we take a look at which schools are really successful with their car line, because some schools really do a great job of this. Some of them are very efficient, and you get in and out, and it's not a big issue. And other schools do have a longer procedure. I think one way to handle this would be to take someone from one of those schools that are doing a good job on this and have them visit a different school and just make a couple suggestions. This isn't necessarily rocket science. This is just analyzing the best way to handle that situation. Let's utilize our resources and see what's working at one place and see if we can take that to another site.
Well, I worked at a school where they actually did have an efficient car line. Everybody, actually 2 schools. Everyone who lived on the east side of the school went to the east side car circle, and everybody who lived on the west went to the west side. And it was much more efficient because you don't have people trying to wait and turn out. They're just going exactly what they're coming back out the same way. However, I think that one of the biggest problems we have is that we have the buses coming in half empty, and we don't allow students who live 2 miles away or to, like say 2.1 mile, they can't get on the bus. There's whole communities where they have, for instance, low-income housing, and you could pick up 20 kids there, but it's 1/10 of a mile over the line. So I think that we need to move that line, pick up more kids, and that'll get rid of some of the cars. And also the fundamental schools, if we're going to make schools fundamental, we're just going to have to make big parking lots and have them walk and get their kids. Those are the worst traffic jams. For instance, Madeira Beach Fundamental, everybody drives, so it's a problem there. And I think that we need to redesign that whole situation.
I'm going to piggyback on the fundamental because one of the concerns is with inequity within our district, and the fundamentals don't provide transportation. So we need to provide transportation to our fundamental schools so that they're accessible to all families. That would reduce part of the car line in those particular institutions or schools. And the other concern in regards to, there is a team that comes from the district and visits all the schools and reviews things like car circle and rainy day dismissal and works with the administration on how to facilitate it. It needs to be done more frequently and with fidelity so that it's consistent across the different schools. However, I think the other thing that we need to do is communicate more effectively with parents so there's a feeling of trust about having your kid on the school bus. Because many families opt not to put their children on the bus because they don't feel like it's safe. We have cameras on the bus, but there's not a feeling of safety on the bus. So we need to promote that. And I also think we need to start looking at partnerships with public transportation for some of our high schools, especially those where we're using arterial busing. It would promote ridership for our high school students in the future, and it would also reduce the number of folks riding around in the buses and we don't have enough bus drivers because we pay less than the public transit. So we would not have to have that be an issue.